Wonderful. So we're going to drop the questions in the chat, but they're really kind of general questions. And I want to thank Mark for your support in this group as well. And so, we can just start with some reflections, some thoughts, what hit you, what kind of made you react during the presentation, and where's your thinking? We heard some of that already, but let's go a little bit deeper as well. And feel free, panel members, you can feel free to raise your hand or just come off mute and start chatting.
I'll jump
Elena, in. if I may just interrupt for one moment, I'm overseas right now and I'm logged in, so I just want to let everyone know. I hope my connection holds up, but and I'll let you go and then I'll come back. Thank you.
Thank you for your commitment to this work and being with us even overseas. Really appreciate that. Wonderful. I did hear somebody else want to jump in also.
It's Billy, Elena. One thing that I asked Beth about the impact of, because I saw the research you shared with us that 56% of families choose to have their children at home or with family members. I don't want to assume that also includes family childcare, but I think there is a connection there. My question really about the impact was, I go back to Dr. Gilliam's work, that students of color have a very different experience even in early care. So it wasn't about the impact like brain development. It was the impact on the child himself or herself. All right. So I'm thinking about kind of how I've seen what has been presented around funding options. And I don't know, I just go, are we considering the 56% of the families who will still choose, and they should have some type of funding, right, to provide for their children too? Because when we talk about it, we keep talking about it around this pay thing, but I'm saying to myself, well, if I'm thinking about most people, if you can't afford to pay for housing and you don't get paid enough, right, you're going to stay home with your children, not just because you think it's a good thing, but there's a group that's just staying home because it's affordable to stay home. So I'm just, I know we're talking about the business side and jobs. I'm like, you're not filling 100,000 jobs if they don't pay a livable wage so people can live in our very expensive state. So it's just, I'm looking at how it impacts the child, but also it may benefit, right? Benefit the child also in some cases, if they do have access to funding or continue to have access to funding that allows them be in a communal setting, right? Whether it's family childcare, family member, or even parent. And I know we haven't talked about that. We're not in Denmark or some of these other places where people get to stay home. And I think they should be. I'll put my position out there because it benefits the child, not because it benefits our economy. And we know it's going to benefit society and our economy in the long run, because you are making the investment in the child early. So that research surprised me as the 56%, but most of the things presented don't necessarily, we're not talking about what the research says, which is 56% choose family members or themselves. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for those comments. I think what I'm hearing from you is like really thinking about the scope of the recommendations, right? And how do we think about both those that are in our state funded system or touched by our state funded, strategies and approaches such as Care for Kids, and then the other kind of group as well that might not be directly connected there. And right, thank you. Diana.
So one model I was wondering if we looked at, and this is maybe something Dr. Johnson hasn't seen or experienced, but there is a state elder care program, and I'm going to forget what it's called. At least there used to be a few years ago, where the state pays for care for an elderly person on Medicaid and at home, because, you know, the care has been proven to be better at home than in a nursing home for most people. And there used to be an option if you were an adult, a family member, any kind of family member of this elderly person that needed care at home, you would get paid for taking care of your family member at home. And I don't know if something similar like that could be done for childcare, so that for some families who do want that stay-at-home model just for the beginning of life, maybe, you know, the first 6 to 9 months a year, that would be an option, or longer term. But it was a very great model. And I only know because my mom had a care provider who had to take care of her own mother-in-law and used this plan in Connecticut to get paid to stay home with her mother-in-law.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you're raising up, right? How can we continue to kind of uncover additional strategies of which to support families as well? Yeah, and it's kind of this, we know the research and showing us how important and critical high quality care is for young children and their developing brains, and really being able to think about, right, all aspects of the approaches as well.
Elena, if I may, thank you for the comments today, but I was thinking as I heard all the presentations, looking at some of the resources and programs that we currently have in the state, just within mind when our recommendations come back to the legislature. And I was very struck by hearing today, I knew this Smart Start program. I'd like to learn more about how, because I think that would resonate very, very well with the legislature, especially hearing that it could open up 1,900 more, if I heard it correctly today, slots, and that it's relatively, not that cost should be the answer. I know we're keeping the child front and center in everything that we do, but I'd like us to, as we go through the recommendations, to look at what we can do rather quickly and what would be feasible and what would actually resonate well. And I think looking at some of those programs, I also would like to see more info, if we could, continuing to engage the business community. I remember when we first started this we had CBIA there, and I know there's work going on, but just to really continue to, because I think those, again, are approaches that really go over very well when we look at tiered approaches, and that everyone has some ownership in what we're doing. So those were my initial reactions today. I was very, very pleased to see that we're keeping compensation there. I will say one smaller comment. The K through 12 system also has disparity. We've been talking about that, depending and looking to what we can do there. But I think keeping in touch with all the various agencies as we go through, and today some of the panel members brought that out, that, you know, looking at DCFDS, I think that's really crucial, that we all keep communicating and staying together and see where we can maximize those resources. So thank you very much. Trying to hold on here so I don't get disconnected. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you very much. You brought up a lot of great points, I think, underscoring, right, some of what you're seeing in the draft recommendations about really wanting to ensure a mixed delivery system, right, building upon what we currently have happening, as well as starting anew and new pieces of that, and also kind of phased in, right? How are we thinking about these recommendations and prioritizing as we think about a 5-year plan? And so thank you for laying out those thoughts in that way. Jessica.
So there are so many things I want to prioritize and name, but I'm going to be super disciplined and stick to 3 that I really want to make sure everyone in the panel is thinking about. So the first is infant toddler care and just the massive disparity in access to infant and toddler care. And this is very directly an issue of equity because, you know, if you're wealthy enough to hire someone to come into your home, that's one thing. But if not, it is just incredibly difficult to find access to care for your infants and toddlers. And we as a state have really put a thumb on the scale by investing so heavily in pre-K because most childcare programs exist by creating a balance of slots for infants and toddlers and preschoolers. As a result, we are really in a critical situation. And I think it's very important that our state address that imbalance. There's so much more I could say about that. I won't right now. The second piece is around compensation for educators, including, of course, family childcare educators, again, to maintain supply, but also as a matter of equity for the educators themselves and to support the educators that are supporting the families with the fewest resources, because we know they take the direct hit themselves when families don't pay. The third piece is presumptive eligibility, just because we didn't talk much about that and not everyone here might know what it means. This is something that's actually getting a big push from the federal government right now. Right now, if you want to go to work and you apply for Care for Kids, you are kept waiting for months. That either prevents you going back to work or imposes the hardship on your educator to take your child on faith that the state will pay her eventually. Presumptive eligibility means there's a period of time, 1, 2, 3 months, you start your job, you get approved on the initial paperwork. It is hugely efficient. I think, you know, the way that CHIPS works is a great analogy here. It also, by the way, for those of you interested in state efficiency, it puts the burden on the state to make that determination quickly instead of keeping families waiting around for months because there are dollars running out the door. So it flips the incentives and actually makes government more efficient. It makes it possible for families to go back to work fast, and it makes sure educators will get paid. So I am all in with presumptive eligibility, and I really hope this group will be too.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for explaining a little bit more in depth around presumptive eligibility. It is a little bit of a complex when it comes to the funding and kind of how that would work, but you really laid it out very clearly as to what potentially the benefits are and could be for families, especially and businesses. Excellent. Great.
Elena, sorry, Deputy Commissioner, it looks like there's a question in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so it's around Smart Start.
Yeah, it was my question. I couldn't raise my hand, so I didn't know. I didn't have the
That's
ability to
okay.
raise my hand. Yeah, I was just saying, I'm a little bit confused. I'm not sure I actually totally agree with the conclusion about we have excess supply, given the comments of our presenter and some other issues. But if we do assume that there's a surplus of preschool supply, I'm not clear about the emphasis on Smart Start, which is in fact focused on preschool slots. So that confused a little bit. And secondly, I just sort of want to say that I understand we really, there's a lot of work that has to be done on supply, but I think we have to be just as intentional about digging deeper to really understand what families want and need. I think we know a lot of parameters from outside the state, but even as the commissioner emphasized, we know there are even differences among communities. And I think building a system without understanding what the users want, that we may start to build things that people aren't going to come. And so when I see that there is a reported surplus of slots, I wonder if it's a surplus of preschool slots or if it's because it's not the right kind. And then clearly, because we know it's also price sensitive, the issue is affordability. How much is that going to go up? So it also raises issues about the opt-in rates that you're doing. So while I really appreciate what Dr. Johnson said about, we do have to really look at the, families that want the option of staying home or using family members. what do we do about that part of the system? And even though we can't deal with it, I think we have to be explicit about what are all the choices family want. And as we think about rolling out, what are the pieces that we can do? So I'm a little bit worried about our heavy emphasis on our current supply without digging deeper about understanding about what the market is looking for.
Yes. Thank you for raising those up. And I think that, you know, this is a little bit what we want to hear from panel members, right? What questions is the data raising for you? Where could we do some potential additional analysis or clarify some of the information that is being shared? And I'm hearing questions around preschool and the supply and demand around preschool. So Mark, I didn't know if you wanted to dive in a little bit around how we look at the data of preschool and that we're potentially not matched up where the preschool spaces are available. And I can share from, you know, just from the kind of school readiness spaces that we have currently available, we have seen a demand in places where there isn't enough supply, and where we do have more supply has been challenging to fill those spaces. And so there we have seen already through just our current data, a little bit of a mismatch potentially of what that looks like across our state. Mark, anything to add?
No, I think the points that have been made are great points. I think